overdone it again.
Going to Mrs. Lloyd. Mrs. Lloyd leads by 4 games to 2.
Well, Mrs. Lloyd there getting a couple of points that she, I'm sure, didn't expect to get off the volley of her opponent. Leading 4-2.
Love. Love. .30-15.
And that's more like the touch on the volley of Mrs. Corley.
All. .30. Game to Mrs. Lloyd. Change the balls, please. Five games to 2, Mrs. Lloyd leads, first set.
Well, Chris Evert leading by 5 games to 2, and I have the impression just at the moment that she isn't really having to exert too much pressure herself, because she's being presented with a lot of unforced errors from her Australian opponent. And Mrs. Corley seems to be giving me the impression too, of course, that she is in need of match play. But Anne, would you think that is a fair summing up of the situation at the moment?
Yes, Dan, I agree completely with you. Chris has progressed through these championships without having to do too much, but she does just enough to win whenever she really has needed to do so. She just manages to raise her game for the vital points so far. But But Evonne quite capable of causing some problems yet. 2-5 down in the first set.
Love 15.
Well, even Miss Evert won't hit many better returns of service than that.
Love 30. Fifteen 30. All.
Well, the tactic worked. Mrs. Corley definitely drew her opponent in with that short ball, and then the very low attempt at the passing shot.
40-30. Mrs. Corley. Mrs. Lloyd leads by 5 games to 3.
Mrs. Corley varying her tactics in that service game, coming in sometimes, staying back, and as we mentioned earlier, drawing her opponent in with an intentional short ball. So serving for the first set at 5-3, Mrs. Lloyd.
Love. All.
When the approach shot is as accurate as that, it usually means that you get a fairly easy lob or volley. Great play.
$30-15.
No hesitation to come in and make the volley pass with the drive.
$40-15.
So that rather too long return of service going beyond the baseline gives Mrs. Lloyd 2 set points.
$40-30.
But still set point.
Deuce.
Well, that was a very easy forehand approach shot. Waist-high ball that shouldn't have been an error. Deuce. Well, that's cruel, isn't it?
Advantage, Mrs. Lloyd.
So that very cruel net cord indeed gives Mrs. Lloyd her third set point.
Game and first set to Mrs. Lloyd, 6-3.
I'm just wondering, Anne, whether Mrs. Corley, if she was really match tight, having had a lot of tournaments under her belt, would have missed a simple volley like that. I wonder.
Yes, it was rather a bad miss. Actually, this first set hasn't really lived up to expectations, but Chris Lloyd is seems to be quietly confident, and as I said earlier, she's just producing sufficient to make the margin of 6-3. And Chris, as is the normal fashion these days in the locker room, is wearing transfer on her shoulder. Looks like a strawberry, very apt for Wimbledon.
Isn't it a heart, Anne? I'm not sure.
Chris looking very neat and trim, I think, in her white dress, predominantly white, as is normal at Wimbledon. Little green striped trim.
Second set, Mrs. Corley to serve.
Evonne has a little, her normal outfit with a little blue and red trim too. So the opening of the second set.
15 love.
And that ace may be the harbinger of good things for Mrs. Corley. Mrs. Corley, I beg one.
All.
Well, when that backhand volley is going well, it really is a sight. It's almost in women's tennis as good as blue hose used to be in men's.
14-15. Game to Mrs. Corley. First game, second set.
And Evonne, I think, will be quite pleased to win the opening game of the second set. It should start to tend to give her a little more confidence. She has, since she was injured at Wimbledon last year, she has only played 7 tournaments and won one of these at Chichester 2 or 3 weeks ago, where she had that fascinating match with Billie Jean King. She won 10-8 in the third. But Evonne raised her game on Monday to beat Virginia Wade, but that was a different type of match. Virginia hits the ball hard, comes to the net and supplies Evonne with a target and with pace. But Chris Lloyd's game is a totally different proposition. This means that Evonne has to take her time, play the ball quietly, and then make her own openings. And this, of course, when you're not match tight, presents problems of its own.
Mrs. Lloyd to serve. First service.
Mrs. Lloyd serving, love 1. First set, second set.
15 love. Love. $30-15.
And the drop shot rather surprising Mrs. Lloyd there. She was a bit slow off the mark. But Mrs. Corley has got to get better timing, better control off the ground than she's shown in the match so far.
40-15.
Well tried, well tried.
Going to Mrs. Lloyd. 1 game all, second set.
That really was a fine rally, both girls playing well at the same time, and like all really good rallies, finishing with a winner. Very lovely 2-angled cross-court angle from Mrs. Lloyd. 1 game all, second set.
Love.
That was a nicely executed backhand lob off a very low and awkward ball, I must say.
Net. First service. Love.
Good control under very severe pressure there. Mrs. Corley on the volley. Really made to stretch.
Net. 1 fault. $30-15. $40-15.
How that first wide-angled forehand volley spread eagled the opposition, making the backhand volley a very simple task. 40-15.
$40-30. Deuce.
And the forehand broke down on the 17th stroke of the rally. 1-all, deuce, second set.
Advantage, Mrs. Lloyd.
And that really was a great forehand pass. Although I know that the Australian approach shot wasn't really deep, but nevertheless was a very quickly picked up ball, a lovely passing shot. Break point.
Deuce.
A little bit of trouble, Mrs. Lloyd, with her forehand approach to the net down the line.
Advantage, Mrs. Lloyd.
So for the second time, break point, Mrs. Lloyd. Oh, that's a good cross-court shot again.
Game to Mrs. Lloyd. Mrs. Lloyd leads by 2-1, second set, and by 1 set to love.
Well, Anne, I must say that was quite a cross-court pass, wasn't it?
Yes, Dan. This is the last point of the last game then. Evonne struggling with her service, not quite getting enough depth, but here is made to stretch for an extremely, that's the most difficult shot in tennis, that high backhand. And she plays it a little bit short and really opens up the court, and Chris supplying the appropriate forehand cross-court pass that Evonne just could not get down to.
I think it's fair to say, Anne, isn't it, that on the forehand, Mrs. Lloyd is safer and stronger across court than down the line?
Yes, she is a little. Most players prefer the cross court because obviously the net is lower in the centre. It's a safer shot, and it's easier to return the ball in the direction whence it came than change the direction and play over the high part of the net down the line. But Chris can hit her ground strokes extremely accurately in both directions, and this causes a lot of problems for any volleyer. Every time I think Evonne is starting to flow, she seems to make that odd mistake when she really needs to punch the ball away for a winner. Not quite sure whether she's concentrating fully. She seems to be finding it hard to really think about this match. Chris then with a break behind her, 2-1 in the second set.
Love.
We mustn't forget that Mrs. Lloyd held the doubles championship here with Miss Navratilova a couple of years ago, I believe it was. Seeing that high forehand volley that she played so well reminded me of that doubles title.
Love.
She just can't really find her touch today. Just too delicate again on the drop volley.
Love.
40 love and 2-1 to Miss Evert in the second set.
Game to Mrs. Lloyd. Three games to one, Mrs. Lloyd leads in the second set.
Yes, forgive me. It's very hard to remember that she's now Mrs. Lloyd, of course. So, Mrs. Corley struggling a bit out here, not really quite finding her touch and range of shot. 1-3 down in the second set, having lost the first set 6-3.
Love 15.
Fine anticipation by Mrs. Lloyd and the execution of the forehand drive perfect.
All. Fifteen 30. All.
30 all.
40-30.
And Mrs. Corley hadn't really covered that one. It's 40-30. They played.
Game to Mrs. Corley. Mrs. Lloyd leads by 3 games to 2, second set, and by 1 set to love.
So Mrs. Lloyd still ahead in this set with a break of service in hand too. And you think we're going to see a resurgence of the spirit of Mrs. Corley?
Well, I keep hoping, Dan, that she's going to start and play this match as I know she can. She's won 2 of her own services in this second set, and it seems to me that it should fall into place, but it doesn't quite. And somehow too, Chris Lloyd has that happy knack of producing the extra shot at the end of a rally that really makes the difference. Chris, to me, seems quietly confident that she has everything in hand, and she seems to be expecting a lot more trouble from Evonne than Evonne is giving her. But of course, there's always the point where Evonne might start to play a little better, and then Chris again will have to raise her game. But she still has the break.